Over 2,000 years ago, a child was born in a small town called Bethlehem. To the people living there, it may have seemed like just another night in a quiet province of a vast empire. But beyond that small town stood the most powerful civilization the world had ever seen, the mighty Roman Empire. At the time, Rome ruled over millions of people across 3 continents. Its armies controlled vast territories, its roads connected distant lands, and its emperors held absolute power. The emperor on the throne was Augustus, the ruler who transformed Rome into a global superpower. And it was during his reign that the birth of Jesus Christ took place, an event that would eventually change the course of human history. So what was the world like under Roman rule when Jesus was born? To understand that world, we must first understand the empire that controlled it. The Roman Empire began as a small city-state in the Italian peninsula, but over centuries, it expanded through military conquest and political alliances. By the time of Augustus, Rome had defeated its rivals and emerged as the dominant power of the Mediterranean world. Under Augustus, Rome entered a long period of stability known as the Pax Romana, or the Roman peace. For nearly 2 centuries, much of the empire experienced relative peace and prosperity. Trade flourished, cities expanded, and the empire's vast network of roads allowed soldiers, merchants, and travelers to move across thousands of miles. These Roman roads would later play a crucial role in spreading the message of Christianity across the empire. But while Rome appeared stable and powerful from the outside, life in its provinces was often complicated. One of those provinces was Judea, the land where Jesus was born. Although the region had its own traditions and religious identity, it was firmly under Roman control. Local rulers governed the area, but their authority ultimately depended on Rome. At the time of Jesus' birth, Judea was ruled by Herod the Great, a powerful but controversial leader appointed by Rome. Herod was known for his massive building projects. He expanded cities, constructed fortresses, and undertook the enormous task of renovating the temple in Jerusalem, transforming it into one of the most impressive religious structures of the ancient world. But Herod's rule was also marked by fear and suspicion. Determined to maintain his power, he was known for eliminating anyone he believed might threaten his throne. It was during this tense political climate that the birth of Jesus occurred. According to historical accounts recorded in the Gospel narratives, the Roman authorities ordered a census across the empire. This decree required people to travel to their ancestral towns to be registered. Because of this decree, Joseph and Mary traveled to Bethlehem, where Jesus was born. While this event seemed small at the time, it unfolded within the framework of one of the most powerful political systems the world had ever known. The Roman Empire was built on strict hierarchy and authority. At the top stood the emperor, followed by governors, military commanders, and local rulers who enforced Roman law across the provinces. Roman soldiers were stationed throughout the empire to maintain order. Their presence reminded local populations that Rome held ultimate power. Yet despite this control, the empire also brought significant advancements. Roman engineering produced aqueducts that carried water into cities. Their legal systems influenced future generations of governments, and their road networks connected distant cultures in ways never seen before. Ironically, these same systems would later help the teachings of Jesus spread far beyond the borders of Judea. Within a few decades after his life and ministry, followers of Jesus would begin traveling across Roman roads, carrying his message to cities throughout the empire, from Jerusalem to major Roman centers like Antioch, Ephesus, and eventually even Rome itself. The very empire that once ruled over the land where Jesus was born would become the pathway through which his teachings reached the wider world. Life within the Roman Empire was a mixture of prosperity and struggle. Large cities were filled with markets, temples, and public spaces where people gathered for trade and entertainment. But beyond the wealth of Rome's elite, many ordinary people lived in modest homes and worked long hours to survive. Slavery was common. Taxes were often heavy, and political power remained concentrated among the empire's ruling class. Despite these challenges, the Roman world was also a place where cultures interacted. Greek philosophy, Roman law, Jewish tradition, and Eastern beliefs all existed within the empire's borders. It was within this complex and diverse world that the early Christian movement began to grow. And while Rome believed its empire would endure forever, history would eventually prove otherwise. Over the centuries, The Roman Empire faced internal conflicts, economic struggles, and external invasions. Its power slowly weakened, and the empire that once ruled the ancient world eventually declined. Yet something unexpected happened. The message that began with the birth of a child in Bethlehem continued to spread across the same empire that once overshadowed it. What started in a small province under Roman control eventually reached every corner of the empire and beyond. In time, the teachings of Jesus Christ would influence millions of people and shape civilizations long after the Roman Empire itself had faded into history. Understanding the Roman world at the time of Jesus helps us see the historical setting in which these events unfolded. A world of emperors and armies, power and politics, but also a world where ideas and beliefs could travel across vast distances. And as historians and archaeologists continue to study the ruins of Roman cities and the records left behind by the empire, we gain a clearer picture of the world that existed when one of the most significant moments in human history took place. The story of the Roman Empire is not just a story of power and conquest. It is also the story of the world into which Jesus was born. A world that would soon be transformed in ways no emperor could have predicted. When the Roman Empire ruled the Mediterranean world, its leaders believed their civilization represented the peak of human power. Roman armies were unmatched. Their engineering was revolutionary, and their political authority stretched across vast lands from Britain to the Middle East. Yet history often unfolds in ways no empire can control. Within only a few centuries after the birth of Jesus, something remarkable happened. The teachings that began among a small group of followers in Judea began spreading across the very roads and cities built by Rome. Travelers carried these teachings from Jerusalem to major Roman cities like Antioch, Alexandria, and eventually to Rome itself. What began as a small religious movement eventually grew into a global faith. By the 4th century, the Roman Emperor Constantine the Great legalized Christianity within the empire, marking a turning point that would reshape the religious landscape of the ancient world. Soon after, Christianity moved from being a persecuted belief to becoming one of the most influential religions in human history. Ironically, the empire that once crucified Jesus would become one of the main channels through which his message spread across continents. But the story does not end in ancient times. Today, archaeologists and historians continue to uncover evidence of life in the Roman world during the time of Jesus. Excavations across the Mediterranean are revealing streets, marketplaces, homes, and even inscriptions that help us better understand daily life during that era. Ancient cities once ruled by Rome are still visible today. Visitors walking through ruins in Rome, Ephesus, and Caesarea can still see the remains of Roman theaters, temples, and roads that existed during the time of Jesus. These ruins remind us that the ancient world was real, complex, and deeply connected to the events described in biblical history. Modern technology is also allowing researchers to reconstruct these ancient cities using digital mapping and 3D modeling. By combining archaeology with advanced imaging tools, historians are now able to visualize what the Roman world looked like during the 1st century. These discoveries are helping scholars better understand the political, cultural, and economic environment in which the early Christian movement began. But perhaps the most fascinating part of this story is how the influence of that ancient world still echoes today. Many modern governments still draw inspiration from Roman legal systems. Roads, architecture, and political ideas developed during Roman times continue to shape the structure of modern societies. Even the calendar used across much of the world today reflects the legacy of Roman civilization. And yet, despite all the power Rome once possessed, the empire itself eventually faded into history. What remains is not only the memory of its emperors and armies, but also the lasting influence of events that took place within its borders. In many ways, the birth of Jesus during the height of Roman power represents a moment where two powerful historical forces intersected: the political dominance of Rome and the spiritual movement that would eventually spread across the world. Looking toward the future, scholars believe many discoveries about the Roman world are still waiting to be uncovered, hidden beneath modern cities, buried beneath layers of earth, and scattered across ancient landscapes. are countless artifacts that could reveal new details about life during the time of Jesus. Each discovery brings us closer to understanding how the ancient world shaped the course of human history. And as new technologies continue to develop, future generations may uncover even more insights about the world of the Bible and the civilizations that surrounded it. History is not just about the past. It is a story that continues to unfold as we learn more about the people, empires, and events that shaped our world. If you enjoy exploring the deep history behind the Bible and uncovering the civilizations that influenced it, be sure to subscribe to Ancient Bible History, because every ancient ruin has a story. And some of the most fascinating stories in history are still waiting to be discovered.